Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to another Rezo Open Circle discussion. So my name is Carl Zimmerman, and I'm a research scientist here at Rezo, and I'm also a PhD student in environmental engineering at UBC. And so it's my pleasure today to welcome everybody to the latest of our Open Circle webinar series hosted by Rezo. So here's the blurb about Open Circle. So Open Circle is designed to allow all of our partners and contributors to rural innovation projects to develop broader and richer perspectives and provide feedback on emerging solutions to drinking water health. So the Open Circle seminars, they're not about promoting specific products or winners of any competition or technology, but they're designed to encourage refining problem definitions and brainstorming how to help the water industry to better serve rural communities and thinking about new ways of engaging.
So with that, I'd like to introduce our speaker, as Carl mentioned, Dr. Chengwei Liu, who is an economist with Ph.D. from Cambridge, is an associate professor of strategy and behavioral science and faculty lead of the Global Online MBA Program at the European School of Management and Technology based in Berlin. He has quite a remarkable resume, having held research and teaching positions at various top institutions across or around the world: Cambridge, Oxford, MIT, NYU, National University of Singapore, to name a few. And he's won more than 20 research and teaching awards. Thinkers 50 name him a leading management thinker, and Poets&Quants named him a top 40 under 50 MBA professor. So with that, I'd like to pass it to Chengwei for his presentation, and then I look forward to the discussions with the group. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate this opportunity to share my research with you. As you can see from the title, well, this is about luck. I've been studying this topic for almost 10 years. And the second part of this talk will be about how to tame luck. So the first part, I think I'm firstly trying to convince you why a lot of successes that attract our attention, but actually do not actually deserve it, because luck probably play a more important role. So I'll try to convince you about that. But then the second part, I'm going to put my strategy professor hat back on and try to convince you, yes, there's still some systematic way about how you can innovate and to achieve exceptional success. So that's the plan for today. Feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions. So let's start the discussion of this, well, thinking about the role of luck using a concrete example. So here we have two cases. So on the left-hand side, we have New England Patriots. What they achieved in 2007's one season is that they won 100% of the game in that season. And on the right-hand side, we have Chicago Bulls. What they achieved in that season across 95 and 96, still one season, is that they won 88% of the game in that season. So if I want to ask you to choose one of the two to be the more impressive one, which one are you going to choose? Of course, you may have your answer. I believe some of you are sport fans, and for one of these two things or both. So you may have your answer. But let me show you what my students used to say. So this is the survey I usually ask my students in a variety of different classes, mainly in strategy and also behavioral science, the two courses I taught, and they're across different places, some in the UK, some in the US. Not surprisingly, the majority of them, just like well, usual human being, right? We're really impressed by this perfect performance. So the majority of them went for that. In New England Patriots, their 100% winning rate must have indicated that they have done something right. The team is really good, training, motivation, and so on and so forth. But there's always, well, one or two students from each cohort, they raise their hand and say, well, professor, why are you asking this misleading question? Why am I comparing apple with orange? So probably some of you already recognize this is a very fair feedback or criticism, right? So New England Patriot was from NFL, National Football League, whereas Chicago Bulls is from basketball, NBA. Although this criticism is very valid, but still, based on my past research, well, if you have to choose from one of them, actually this less than perfect performance, the Chicago Bulls, their 88% winning rate, probably is more impressive than this 100% winning rate. Almost suggests that this perfect performance can be too good to be true. And why this example is used, well, in my teaching, because this is a very straightforward example why this perfect performance can be too good to be true. And here's one reason. The number of games they have to play in each season is dramatically different. So in NFL, there are only 16 games to play. So statistical 101 will suggest that, well, when you have a very small sample size for a measure like averages, and then this extreme value are much more likely to be observed compared to a larger sample size. So this the more general point is that exceptional performances, although we are hardwired to think that it must have indicated that the person involved or the team involved, they must be better than the rest. But in modern society, when you have a lot of this context are really unique, probably entail very strong rich get richer dynamics or kind of a strong noise, unreliability, like this example, they should really change your default heuristic. So probably exceptional performance tell us more about the exceptional circumstances that enable such outliers to be realized. And another justification about why this example is relevant, why comparing apple with orange is relevant, because this is what people or media at least do every day, isn't it? So if you look at business magazine or general magazine, there's a lot of ranking about the richest people, about the top performing firms, about the top performing teams across different countries, industries, and so on and so forth. Do we really care about, or the journalists, did they highlight about the circumstances they realize these performances? Not really. Most of the time, the formula of this type of a success story focus on the person, how they are the hero or heroine that try to achieve this exceptional success, and they did. So this can be very misleading. And this actually have interesting implication for prediction, because if too good to be true, this exceptional performance is really about luck, then it should be followed by very strong regression to the mean. So in my latest research, I call it less is more effect, or more formally, is the performance non-monotonicity, is that between your current performance and future performance. Well, then the degree of this regression to the mean or the lack of performance persistence can actually be a very good measure about what is the impact of luck in this data. So in this case, both exceptional performances regress downward to the mean, but as you can see now, the more unreliable one, New England Patriot, they regress much more downward to the mean compared to Chicago Bulls, their 88% winning rate. So of course, many of you probably will have alternative explanation, particularly if you know the context. I'm totally welcome this discussion about sport, but actually I should have mentioned that my actual research did not use this example in the research paper or justification, because this is more anecdotal, right? So my actual research go beyond that and really collect systematic data from a variety of different domains and try to quantify the impact of luck. And in the interest of time, today I'm going to just showcase you one set of data from Billboard. So Billboard is from the music industry. Like every week, they publish the top singles. Like they have 100 list or Billboard 200 list, and today we focus on this Billboard 100 hot single list. So now, here, the analysis is very similar to what I show you, the current performance and the future performance and what would be association between the two. And the data is the Billboard 100 list between 1980 to 2008. And here the focus is on the record labels. So the current performance basically is that for this current record labels, what is the highest rank for their current single has achieved? Of course, top performance in this case is, well, top 1 or top 3 singles, right? That's the best possible performance for record label can achieve. Then we're interested in what is their next performance. In this case, we just computed for all this different performance we observe currently. What is the same actor, in this case, the record label? What is the highest rank their next single achieve? And then for each of this interval, we take the average. That's why we call this y-axis is expected future performance. Now I have a quiz for you, actually. So you will be able to input this a very simple way that you can input this answer in the chat. You have two options. So if you believe in this context that luck doesn't really matter, then you'll go for number one. Why this straight line or this red line represent your belief about luck doesn't really matter here? Because it suggests a perfect performance persistency, right? If a record label, their current single, say, is top one, in a context where luck plays no role, then of course the next single should be number one as well. Of course, this is an extreme case, but if you choose number one or the answer one here, basically reflecting your belief that, well, luck probably matter, but still it's really marginal, not so important in this context. Compared to the second option, the other extreme is that if you believe in this context, luck dominates in performances. So talent, strategizing, resources don't really matter. Then this flat line between current and expected future performance probably reflect what you're believing. Because this suggests that, well, no matter what you observe in the past, you should always regress to the mean. In this context, you can say 50. It's a hypothetical mean, isn't it? So whatever you believe, whatever you observe in the current performance, it tells you nothing. The best guess is the mean performance. So now, shall we have a quiz very quickly? So you can just input one or two so that we can kind of understand the distribution of the belief of yours about the music industry. Please. So we have 25 participants here. So let me say, how many we got now? In the interest of time, probably give you another 10 seconds if you want to input your answer. Oh, and I just saw in the comment, Chris, you made this very important observation also regarding the playoff, that New England Patriots actually did not get the championship after that season, whereas the Chicago Bulls did. So yeah, we can continue this discussion. But actually, if you think about the game structure in terms of sample size, actually we should pay much more attention to the season game instead of the playoff. The playoff, the sample size is much fewer, so it means that the performance actually is even less reliable compared to the season games. But of course, that can be a debate for another day. Great, so let's stop here. Let me take a quick look at the distribution. And you've input 1.5. Okay, so that's actually it's not a bad answer, but I'll show you the results so we can discuss. I think it's fair to say the majority of you went for number one. I would say roughly 60% of you and 40% of you go for number two. So this suggests that the majority of you believe that luck does not matter that much in this context. Let's take a look at what the data tell us. Here we go. Does that surprise you? Basically, for those who answer one, that reflect this 45-degree line or this kind of red line, also the reference here, actually you're not too, your answer actually resemble the actual pattern pretty well, up to a certain point. So if you talk about normal range of performance, like from 100 to top, say, 13, actually this association is very close to the 45-degree line. Strong performance persistency between current and future performance. Regression to the mean still happen because it's flatter than the 45-degree line, but not much. But if we talk about the top performance, like top 13, then the story is very, very different. it follow very, very strong regression to the mean. So they suggest that, well, at least in this context, next time you observe a company, a record label achieving these exceptional successes, you should not be too impressed, because they suggest more about the exceptional luck they have been enjoyed. They should not take much credit, and more importantly, you should predict their next performance to be much less impressive. In this case, it regress all the way to below the mean, below to mediocrity. They cannot replicate their success, basically. And this result also suggests that, well, you should actually focus on someone else. In this case, who have the highest future expected performance? It's the second best. And the second best here, basically just those record labels whose current performance are around the kink, as identified by this data. And theoretically, this actually suggests, well, their circumstances probably is less exceptional. So there's more you can learn from what they did. You can learn from their strategy, learn from how they search for talent, and that is actually much more valuable compared to learn from the best. And another danger is that when you copy from the best or learn from the best, with the benefit of hindsight, you can always find something special to explain why they have superior foresight than others. But this is really just invite yourself to be fooled by randomness. So don't do that. So focus on, pay less attention for the best and more attention to the less exceptional performers. Great, so this is the first part. I hope this, the very quick analysis using this just one data set, but I hope you convince you that, well, at least in some context, luck probably play a much more important role than we hope to believe. So now we can enter the second part. Well, what can we do? How do we tame luck? So they sound contradictory compared to the first part, right? The first part suggests that whenever you observe this exceptional or runaway successes, luck play a more important role. And by definition, there should be no way to capture such a random factor, right? But still, I'm going to try to convince you, yes, there's some way, but it can be very risky, but still, there can be one way. So let's start with this very interesting quote from a venture capitalist, also the founder or co-founder of PayPal with Elon Musk, Peter Thiel. So he's also the author of this very nice book, 0 to 1. So this is the usual interview question he had with the possible company he wants to invest. Tell me something that's true and that almost nobody agree with you on. So why this question is useful? Well, because this is almost a necessary condition about achieving exceptional success, at least in the innovation or entrepreneurship field. So if you do something very similar to others, even the idea per se is good, but you're not going to profit much from that. So you need to be different. And that is basically a strategy 101. If you study strategy, then you should realize the most important necessary condition about achieving success is to have a strategy that's different from the rest. But that is just necessary. That's not sufficient, because Jeff Bezos also, his quote is very useful, because most of this different strategy, contrarian strategy, are wrong. So the important thing is about how to be different and be correct at the same time. So this is the framework when I teach innovation or entrepreneurship, and it's very useful how to evaluate a contrarian belief you may have. Like we call it a value lab. Try to develop a theory for your firm. So feel free to email me and I can send you, of course, I can share the slides with Carl, and you'll have all the slides and this a paper with references. Feel free to ask me, but I'm going to illustrate this framework using a very quick example, so you'll get the core idea. And this example is kind of well known now, right? It's about Moneyball. It's based on the bestseller by Michael Lewis, and also then it became a Hollywood movie. So probably many of you read the book or watched the movie. So this is based on my recent paper, A Theory of Behavioral Strategy Arbitrage. So let me explain. So if you remember what happened in Moneyball or in Major League Baseball, is that there's a conventional wisdom. Many of the scouts or manager of these teams, they believe good players should have certain look, a stereotypical look. However, this conventional wisdom or norm is flawed, right? Because stereotype is based on correlation. So whenever correlation is imperfect, like if you compute the coefficient, as long as it's not 1 or -1, then it's not perfect. So it's flawed. You will have a lot of false positive, false negative mistakes when using this correlation to predict, in this case, talent. But the good news is that whenever a lot of people are doing this, it means that some resources will be mispriced. Some of these players who do not have the look, but actually are good, will be undervalued, and vice versa. Some of them are overvalued. The good news for you now is, well, doesn't that mean an arbitrage opportunity? So you can exploit this opportunity generated by your rivals' biases. But then the story of Moneyball usually is oversimplified. Usually people interpret it as a triumph of using data analytics to identify this arbitrage opportunity. And my paper basically tried to argue, no, the real question we should ask is that, why did Moneyball, this example, did not occur sooner? If you think about data analytics, the statistics technique underlying it has been existed for decades before the case of Moneyball. Also, the data is public available in MLB, everyone can download it. So why using data analytics to capture this arbitrage opportunity did not occur for almost 10 years before Billy Beane, the manager of Oakland A, captured this opportunity? Well, so in my paper, I elaborated on that. Well, some of this attractive untapped opportunity is also protected by this very strong limits to arbitrage. So in the case of Moneyball, almost like the first limit they have to overcome is recognizing that utilizing this norm of stereotypical prediction is flawed. But a lot of people actually are really kind of constrained by that worldview. They cannot see any other way of doing things. But the key thing about this framework or this picture suggests that even you can overcome that colonizing limit, seeing that this prediction is imperfect and you want to use other way of doing things, well, there's still other limits you have to overcome. For example, how do you identify the real hidden gems? Many of these players who do not have the stereotypical look are not good players. So how do you identify those counter-stereotypical players who are actually good? Then you do need to develop your own measure, for example. Then you also have to integrate those, underdogs, atypical players into your team. And you have to kind of justify to your boss or your investor that this approach is legitimate. So all this suggests that why many people actually try to use data analytics in MLB, but they never succeeded until Billy Beane find a way to overcome all these limits. So now back to this value lab framework. So I hope this understanding of the Moneyball of this story help you to see why this framework can be very useful, not just analyzing some of the past case about how to be a contrarian, but also can help you how to innovate in your own context. Let's take a look. So this framework starts with a belief that is common in your field. In MLB or Moneyball case back in 1996 or 1997, is that many teams believe good players should have certain look. So you can extend to your field, right? So like innovation in the water, this resource field cannot make money. So probably that's one of the beliefs that a lot of people shared. But then you can come up with your atypical, uncommon, even unpopular contrarian belief. So in the case of Moneyball, of course, it's the recognition of Billy Beane that this is not right. There must be a different way of doing things. In this case, it's some good players who do not have the right look, but actually they're really good. But then you need to translate this contrarian belief into some core problem and sub-problem you need to solve. Because like Jeff Bezos said, most of the contrarian beliefs are wrong. So you need to examine your contrarian beliefs systematically so that you understand when you should give up, because they may be actually very foolish idea, you should give up, or when they are genuine good idea but overlooked by others, then of course you should proceed. So in the case of Moneyball, is that, well, how do you find the right hidden gems? You have limited resources. How can you find this underdog and they actually can contribute to your team winning? But the sub-problems, as I identified in the previous slide, is also that overcoming all these relevant limits to arbitrage is non-trivial, because a lot of teams before believing they try, but they stopped by these limits. For example, John Henry, this one of the owner, he actually very successful using data analytics in finance. But when he purchased Miami Marlins and applied the same approach, all the team kind of against him. They did not collaborate to such extent that the Marlins achieved the lowest possible performance when they adopt this data analytics approach. So overcoming all these limits is non-trivial. Then causal logic is that now you identify some problems. Now you have to identify how to solve it, and ideally try to state it in an if-then statement. If I do this, then I can solve this sub-problem, and ultimately help us to solve that main core problem we want to solve. And in this case, a little bit detail in the Moneyball case, but remember in the Moneyball case, it's a trading context, right? You want to identify the underdog player from other teams. So now Billy Beane, the manager of Oakland A, basically tried to justify why acquiring this flawed, cheap players is the only thing they can do as the resource limited teams, so that other teams do not try to study why you're hiring this player, right? Should I sell you, charge you more when trading these players with you? And then, of course, run experiment we briefly covered. Then using the public data is fine, using statistics is fine, but sometimes you have to find additional measure that other people do not use so that you can get additional insight. But you have to experiment that to see that, and try to identify this apparently flawed players overlooked by others. Of course, it's very important for shopping for undervalued investment founders. And then recent development in Moneyball or this kind of data analytics in sports is also very interesting. When you search for solution, you should actually look beyond your context. So nowadays, the most trendy approach is not just to use data analytics. Actually, now is to combine with expertise, human experts, and actually you can have the best of both worlds. So it's more about not overemphasizing one of the components, but really have a more balanced view of all these components when predicting players. Great, so that's the very brief introduction of this framework. I hope we can have a more extensive discussion later on, of course. So now in the interest of time, let me just summarize my talk. So many people ask me about, well, this role of luck is important, of course, sometimes it's true. But what about the conventional wisdom of luck? Like if you work harder, you get luckier, or chance favor the prepared mind. I would say I totally agree with that, as long as you are talking about performance in the normal range. Obviously, in this range, if you want to move from poor to good, skill, effort, or greed, all these characteristics matter a lot, right? The unconventional wisdom of luck I want to try to highlight today is that, well, if you want to move from good to great, after you achieve certain threshold of your performances, being at the right place at the right time can be so important that overwhelm the role of skill, effort, or strategy. And very importantly, this limit of strategizing, we should really recognize that, because this is where a lot of decent strategists and entrepreneurs are. They already spend a lot of time, study, have their best innovation available and work on that, and they have achieved this limit. But then, which one of them can really get ahead and become a home run? People need to recognize many of the factors that determine this are beyond their control. And not believing that sometimes can be helpful, but most of the time can lead to overconfidence, illusion of control, and some of the most detrimental biases in business. So recognizing that now you're probably already in a different domain with the different rules to succeed is very important. So we should really change our focus, on the other hand, to from this top to the second best, as some of my research suggests. But of course, if you look around, the bestseller in business will continue being book like this, right? So how do you move from good to great? But if you look at the case study, focusing on books like this, I have another paper to investigate that. Unfortunately, 1/3 of them went bankrupted within 5 years of the publication of this type of books. And the remaining underperform even like a S&P 500 index fund. So focusing on these outliers is really, really problematic. But people usually don't kind of revisit or pay attention to this outlier sold in these books. So someone should really write a book like this one. If you follow my logic, then you can probably see, well, this is much more constructive, right? We can really learn a lot from, well, this type of improvement. But if I'm going to write a book like this, I don't think you should bet on the sales volume of this book. So on that, I really thank you for your attention, and I hope I didn't run out of time. So I'll just stop sharing and look forward to the discussion. Thank you.